Hey everyone, welcome to Prophecy Roundtable. I'm your host, Doug Hamp. Glad to be with you. Hey, if you want to be a producer for the show, go to patreon.com/Doug Hamp. Give whatever you want, maybe a coffee a day or something like that. Makes a huge help. You can be part of this show. You can be part of getting the word out on what God is doing, what's happening in the world, looking at the science and all kinds of stuff. Oh, and by the way, a little disclaimer here. We don't promise to have any answers, but we're going to have a great conversation. Today, we are talking about the solar eclipse and the CERN gods. And Joel is here with me. He is going to take us through a bunch of stuff. Now, I'm going to be the devil's advocate. I'm going to say,
Yes.
whatever. And he's going to share why, maybe the whole April 8th eclipse might be something. So, Joel, I'm looking forward to this. Scott's going to be here in just a couple of minutes, but
Okay.
yeah, so get us started. I think this will be a really interesting discussion today. So take
First
it away,
of all,
man.
I'm going to throw it out to everyone. Oh, I'm muted? Oh, okay. How did that happen?
I heard him just a second ago. Isn't that amazing?
How about
I'll
now?
tell you.
Can you hear me now?
That's how it goes when you do live stuff.
Oh, no.
But yeah, he and I were talking just a second ago, and I heard him just fine. So I'm not quite sure what's happening. I don't know if that's on my side or your side there, Joel. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Go ahead. No.
Can you? No?
Try again. Still
Hello?
don't hear you. Wow, this is weird.
All right, I'm going to click out.
Okay. Don't know what to say about that. Everything was working. Now it's not. So wonderful. Joel, check your settings. Maybe we'll see what we can do here. It was working, everybody. We promise it was working.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Try it again.
Well, yeah, that's strange. I'm not sure what to say, and this was going to be Joel's thing. So now I'm kind of like, oh no, what do I do? All right. Well, okay. So we got April 8th coming up. A lot of people believe that this is going to be a something. So I'm going to take the skeptic's perspective. All right. And in fact, I was just reading an article today talking about how some people believe, a lot of Christians, of course, believe that the April 8th eclipse is going to be something. All right. So, is it really there? So, Joel's going to, show us a bit of sign that, that an eclipse really is a sign. And I'm not disputing that it is a sign. Okay. But there have been many, many, many eclipses. I went and saw the one in 2017. It was really a spiritual experience, I have to say. It was amazing. I went and saw it in the epicenter. Now, if you are planning on looking at this, you're like, oh, I can see it from my place, 90%. No, it's not the same. It's got to be 100% or nothing. All right. It's interesting when the sky gets dark, but it's a totally different experience when you actually see the eclipse 100%. All right. Because something mysterious happens. The animals get really quiet. The lights come on the streets. It really feels like it's night. And to be able to look up at the sun and see the corona, right? The sun that we see there every day is not really there, right? It's being blocked out perfectly by the moon. Now, it's funny for people that are skeptics when it comes to believing that there is a God. You would think that just understanding how perfectly aligned the Bible, how the moon is just perfect, it's that perfect shape from the distance of the sun. That seems more than just a coincidence, right? I mean, it's just perfect so that you can see the corona, and that has allowed us to do all kinds of study about the sun thanks to these different eclipses. So if you do have a chance, I would recommend going and seeing it, but you have to do it 100%. If you're going to, think you can see 80% or 90% and be impressed, you won't. All right. It'll be like, oh, okay, that was interesting, but it's not the same thing. There's just something really amazing when, you start hearing the crickets come out, the birds get quiet, like the whole ambiance changes when you have it at 100%. All right. Well, I see that Scott is here, and hopefully Joel was able to.
Can you hear me now?
Still can't hear him. Can you hear him, Scott? Okay, I think maybe I'm the problem because I can't hear you.
Oh,
well, take it away, Joel. I'm going to see if I can't figure out why I can't hear anybody.
Somebody answer in the comments. Can you hear me?
Yeah, they can.
Answer. Oh no, I know you can, but can they?
They can. I'm reading the comments.
Okay, there you go. All right, I hadn't moved it. Okay, so bottom line is that I'd like all of the guests tonight to comment back. If I don't cover everything, or at least most of the things, then I'd like you to make a comment to me. Joel, you missed it. Joel, you didn't understand this. And keep in mind that Doug and I talked beforehand, and this could be a big nothing burger. It could be, but it's very interesting. There's so many things involved that we should at least study it and be aware of the things going on. So let's hope that I can start clicking through the slides here and move forward. So the main thing is I wasn't paying much attention to this. Then I posted a video and I realized, oh, people love this. And then I saw CERN starting up. And then I saw that there were some other key players from over the last 150 years that seem to be involved in this. And then you look out and you see the Devil Comet showing up during this time frame, which is Pons 12P, and the solar eclipse, of course, and CERN, then the NASA launch, and then the National Guards being called out, and the cicadas. And I mean, it's just so many different things going on. You have to be aware of that. So the main thing is God tells us that he will give us these lights in the dome of the sky to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, though that's otot in the Hebrew, and seasons, moedim, which is our festivals and days and years and things like that. That's Genesis 1:14 through 15. Then also keep in mind that when Yeshua was birthed, there was a star which they had seen in the east that went in front of them until it came and it stopped over the place where the child was. And they saw the star and they were overjoyed. So that's Matthew 7, or Matthew 2, rather, verse 7. And so these magi seemed to recognize that the stars meant something. And if you look at Luke 21:25, here, I'll just read it real quick, just so you're aware of the verse. So Luke 21:25, there will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars, and on the earth, distress among the nations, confused by the roaring of the sea, which is generally the people, and the waves, and the people will faint in fear. So keep in mind, these signs seem to have meaning. So, and then Doug didn't agree with me, but this is from Amos 8, and it talks about an eclipse. When that time comes, says Adonai Elohim, I will make the sun go down at noon and darken the earth in broad daylight. Now, is that related to this eclipse coming up on the 8th? Probably not, but it's just interesting that when that time will come in the future, he'll warn us with an eclipse. Very interesting. And I'll give you enough information that you'll get the general feel of this. So once again, this eclipse is occurring on Nisan 1, which is Aviv 1. And based on how I test things out with Deborah's date tree, and then, oh goodness, why am I blanking on Yoel Halevi and other people like that, that the Aviv, the barley, the heads are ripe and we'll be able to go into that barley harvest. So we should be starting the springtime of the year, and that is called Nisan in the standard Hebrew name, but also it's called Aviv in the Torah. And so that starts on the 8th, and it's very interesting. So you can only have a solar eclipse on a new moon, and you can only have a full moon eclipse during the full moon, which would be, halfway through the month. And Psalm 81:3 talks about, that you're supposed to acknowledge the new moon and the full moon and things like that. So just keep that in mind. It's an interesting time frame. We're watching it. Once again, Nisan 1 is the time of Exodus 40, when Moses erects the wilderness, Bamidbar, Mishkan, which is the tabernacle out in the wilderness there. And so it was time to sanctify the holy items. And there's a whole lot going on in Israel right now. We'll get to that in the later slides about the red heifer and everything like that. So the sages have taught over the millennia, this is from Sukkah 29a, that what causes a solar eclipse affects the Gentiles more, because the Gentiles reckon by the sun and the solar eclipses. So it would be a bad omen for the entire world if the sun is eclipsed. On the other hand, if the moon is eclipsed, the Jews should be looking at that. Israel should be looking at that and being aware of that. So the main thing is we are going through an eclipse of the sun, and that means that it relates more to Gentiles and to not to Israel as much. So we'll see. We'll see what it means. And also, as Doug had mentioned beforehand, there's the 400 nature. Tav in our Hebrew language, so we go Aleph to the Tav. Tav is the last letter. That's a 400 in our gematria, we call it. And so the sun, well, the moon is 400 times smaller than the sun, and 400 units further away, so they can eclipse each other, and so one will pass in front of the other and the other will pass in front of the other. And it's just interesting how these eclipses mark time, and God warned us again in Genesis 1 that this would matter to us. So once again, we've seen the 7 Salems during the 2017 eclipse, 8 Ninevehs this time around. Nineveh is Jonah, and it's an interesting sign. And then there's an interesting history. 1803, we had the cicadas. And so now we're going to have 13 and 17-year cicada broods popping up in April 24 of 24. So just interesting. And in the Little Egypt area. Scott, do you have anything to jump in on? And I see Doug. Do I need to let you guys in?
Nope.
Okay, just should I continue on?
Please.
Okay, all right, let's go on.
Yep.
Okay, so we have had 8 eclipses so far in our country, 7 technically. We're going to have we've had the 8th in 2017, and they were related to war. So this is from Mark Biltz, and he cited, in 1778 and 1780, it was an eclipse that was around the Revolutionary War. Then the 1860s was the Civil War. And then the 1970s was the Vietnam War. So they're generally related to war. I'm not saying that we're going to have a war, but everybody across the world right now is talking about war. So I sensed that World War III would happen at the tail end of the 7 years. But, there are war drums beating every day of the week. So it's just interesting to note this. This is once again Mark Biltz. Continuing on. It's intriguing that it was 6 years, 6 months, 6 weeks, and 6 days between the eclipses from 2017 to 2024. And also, for those of you that are wondering, it's physically possible for us to have 3 days of darkness at some point in time. The sun could potentially micronova, which would not be a full nova. It would just be where, this is going to sound really weird, but it would be like goat hair affixing to the sun and then blasting off and causing a micronova. And it's physically possible. We're starting to prove that this has happened about every 12,000 years in our cycles on the Earth. So the sun has done this before, and there seems to be a dust cloud heading at the sun right now. So we may have 3 days of darkness at some point in time. Okay, continuing on, the eclipses are going to cross near Little Egypt, which is really weird. I mean, how does this work out? Little Egypt, and so the cities' names are named after Carmi and Cairo and Thebes and Karnak and Goshen and Dongala. I mean, it's just weird how it's Little Egypt where it's crossing. So many interesting points that you have to cite them all. And if I'm missing anything, people, go ahead and tell me in the comments section. Okay, so once again, some of the Ninevehs don't match, but generally it's going across a bunch of Ninevehs, and that's a sign of Jonah. So basically, I'll get to Jonah in the next slide, but the main thing is that Congress passed a really bad spending bill, and then they took a break until the 9th of April after the eclipse. Okay, and one more time, this is a picture of Nineveh in these 7 states. Very interesting. Okay, so here's Jonah. What we seem to believe now is that there was an eclipse in 763 BCE. 3 months later, Jonah arrived. So they had this big sign, and it was probably a very interesting eclipse that scared them half to death. And so by the time he showed up and he said, it's time to repent, they did. The intriguing thing is everyone from the king down to the commoner, they all repented, put on sackcloth. Can you imagine the United States repenting at this point in time? I can't imagine it. Okay, this is from Michael Snyder. We had him on the show a few weeks ago, and I think he got the information from Rachel Baxter, who was also on the show. And so he's saying that if you look at it, historically speaking, in 1806, there was a total solar eclipse that crossed North America from Baja, California to Massachusetts. Then in 1811, there was another solar eclipse that occurred on Constitutional Day. And then, so we have the eclipses, then, and the crossing point was Cleveland. And then what happened in 1811 and 1812 was the greatest earthquake in the history of the United States. And you could hear the bells ring in Boston, that far away from the New Madrid. So New Madrid is basically south of St. Louis by about probably 100 miles. And so that is a fault line that's active to this day. And also there was a comet, Tecumseh's comet came through also. It comes through every 3,065 years. And so these signs are rather interesting, people. So there were eclipses before the New Madrid earthquake. Let's go forward to 1963, and we have the Alaska solar eclipse, followed by the 1964 Alaska earthquake. And it's just, now, they weren't exactly, they're about 80 miles to 100 miles apart from where the eclipse was and where the earthquake was, but that's still pretty close and pretty devastating. So whether one causes the other, I'm not saying that, but there seems to be some weird, interesting similarities between the two. Okay. And this is from the University of Alaska, Anchorage. Okay. Continuing on, the other things involved, the Aleph of the first eclipses, and I'm sorry, the slide is so small, but 2017 through 2021, 2023, and now 2024, you add them all together and you get an Aleph, a paleo Aleph. And if you just look at the two eclipses of 2017 and 2024, you get a Tav. The Aleph is the first letter of our Hebrew language. The Tav is the last. And as I mentioned, it's 400, which is interesting because the sun and the moon are 400 units apart and 400 sizes apart. So it's just very interesting how God made it that way as a sign for us. So the guy in the middle is Alistair Crowley. We'll cover that. It's going to get weird, people. He prophesied in 1904, and we'll cover that in a slide in just a minute here. The other thing is, look around you right now. Mark Zuckerberg and other billionaires are building bunkers, okay? And also there's a chicken plague going on right now. There are other, I read a report earlier today, and it was about someone trying to manufacture more plagues. And we've gone through it in 2020, and we don't want to go through it again, but somebody wants that to occur. The other thing is there are fault lines. There's the mid-continent fault line that seems to go across America, basically patterning Interstate 80. And then also there's this New Madrid fault line and so they transverse each other. And so on the right-hand side, you could just see there's this crack, the 1,700-mile crack across that seems to be based off satellite data that it's just very interesting. There are these prophecies over the last 50 to 100 years of the center of the country having to flood. And so once again, it's all circumstantial, but it's interesting. Continuing on, it's an eclipse, people, but look at this. No trucks are allowed in Texas on April 8th. Okay, why would a truck be a problem on April 8th? Okay, during the eclipse time frame, and no schools. Many hundreds of schools on the path are closing down. Why? It's probably going to be very beautiful and interesting, scientific, but why close down? Doug, did you have a question?
Well, I mean, there's a very practical reason for not having people have trucks on the road, is that there's going to be lots and lots of visitors coming to these places, and so, I mean, I just read about a place that's, declaring a state of emergency, not because they think that the eclipse is going to do anything to us, but that all of the lookers are going to be just everywhere. I remember when I went to see it in 2017, I went to Nebraska. I forget which little town, but it was crowded. I mean, there were a lot of people, a lot of cars in this otherwise very, very small town. And so, it was just very congested, and I get it. I think there's a very practical reason. So just throwing some reason in there for us instead of,
it's interesting. Yeah. Scott, what were you going to say?
Down here in Alabama, I mean, we turn small towns into like 200,000 people attending on a weekend. That's just, but I guess if it's spread over a wide area of Texas, it would be hard to manage crowd control. But I I think something's going to happen. I'm not saying it's April 8th. I'm not saying it's going to be Passover. Just like I felt something was going to go down during Feast of Tabernacles last year, and it did. I didn't know. I think something major is going to happen over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, and I don't know what. I mean, I'm just watching. And like a lot of people making predictions, I'd rather just watch and get people just to, because I do believe, like, I think we can all on this panel 100% say the rapture is not happening.
Thank you. You answered that
April
question.
the 8th.
Yeah.
It's not happening on April 22nd. It's not happening this fall. I mean, we still
Amen.
have to go through the period when we can't buy or sell, and it's not going to be a pretty time. It's not going to be Earth as normal. But I'm just thinking of, like, just listening today. I mean, Iran and Israel, they're starting to ratchet up even more so than what's been happening over the last 6 months. You know, you put it in the title, Joe. CERN's doing something.
We'll get to that.
That's already a spooky, weird organization.
Yeah. I'll make it even more spooky.
and you know, and then you got a lot of the people that you know believe NASA is just a big lie, but they're firing rockets, you know, to do some testing and stuff. So I don't think there's anything to the NASA thing. The CERN thing intrigues me.
It all is interesting, guys. And so let's continue
Keep
on.
going,
And
please.
you guys jump in if you want to. And if you see some cool questions, jump in, please. Okay. Or questions or comments or anything like that. Okay. So buying extra groceries. They're literally telling us to buy extra groceries for this time frame. 4 states in the trajectory have urged residents to stock up on groceries and gas. Why? And this is from All News Pipeline. Here's on the other side, why has the National Guard been deployed to Texas for the upcoming solar eclipse? So this is Click to Houston, one of their local stations. Very interesting, you know? So the National Guard being called out. And Doug, I see your point. It is going to be a lot of people, and they won't necessarily be orderly. So I get your point. Okay, so this is NBC News. When the solar eclipse arrives, New York prisons will be locked down. Well, the prisoners are suing. They want to go see the eclipse. So it's interesting. These are the Texas counties that are declaring an emergency over this eclipse: Bell County, Travis County, Kaufman County, and then Indiana, and then New York State, the whole Niagara region. And we'll get to a few more slides here, but in 1833, that upstate Niagara region was hit the most by falling debris. We'll call it asteroids, meteorites, whatever you want to call it. So it was very crazy. And that really kicked off that rapture hoopla of the Seventh-day Adventists, the Millerites, we'll call them, of 1843, 1844. So these meteorite storms, like, that was a big one, guys. And I'm not predicting a meteorite storm, but it gets people going. Okay, more. So this is horrible. Poor Texas. They're not going to have as much energy because the sun is going to be eclipsed. They'll lose 16% of their power, and they already lost many of their solar farms due to hail just a few weeks ago. News Talk 1290 AM talks about that. Well, you know, it's going to be horrible. And you know, there could be some other leaks and things like that from the panels. But then, so there's your 16%, and making the most of a volatile energy price situation. It's going to be intriguing. So that's CBS News telling us that this will affect poor Texas, you know, and other states. They're going to lose some power, especially Texas. They don't have the solar power already from their panels being broken. So one more sign. Now, I want to point this out as we move into this section of the slide. This is the area where Doug's the expert. And this has to do with Exodus 23:13. I'm going to read the names of these gods, small g gods. I'm going to spell them out, not say them, just because it says there. Pay attention to everything I have said to you. Do not invoke the names of other gods or even let them be heard crossing your lips. And the problem is that's what this whole section is about. So, and then he talks about the Sabbath and of course about the Moedim. So it's right between the Sabbath, Moedim. Don't invoke the names of gods. And that's what everyone on the planet today is doing. So let's jump in. Well, that would be Thor on the left-hand side, Thor, I should say, and then Neptune on the right-hand side. And these are the movies today. This is all we generally see right now. And this is what's coming up as I discuss the eclipse. Okay, and more, I'm not even, you can read them, people, okay? These are the names of these movie gods, okay? And it's weird how it's going to pop up going forward. You're going to notice it on April 8th. Once again, you can read through this yourself, the names of these ancient gods in all of these movies. Most of the movies right now are Marvel Comics and other people like that. And I don't go to movies anymore because it's all about the wrong gods, and there's no research to be done there. You're not really reading anything historic, just their ideas. And Doug talks about Enlil all the time. He is the king of the gods. He's from Babylon. Well, if I want to study the solar CMEs and other solar activity, I have to go out and look at NASA's Enlil. Yeah, it's their way of studying the sun, and it's interesting. So that's one of the gods, and so with all of these activities going on, the sun has been very busy lately. So I'm constantly looking at this particular god, so to speak. Okay, and it's in 3D. Then there's another god. So if you want to look at other astrophysical applications, you need to go out to ZEUS 3D, and it's an app that's been developed for them to be able to monitor other solar activities and give you a real-time view of what's going on with the sun and how much energy is being kicked out from a CME or other solar activities, coronal wind and things like that. This is going to get weird. Okay, so back in 1904, we have this creature named Alistair Crowley and his wife named Rose, and they got married, ran down for their honeymoon in Egypt, and she channeled a demon called AIWASS. Okay, and they wrote their law. So we believe in the Torah and the Bible. They believed love is the law, love under will, but the problem is it's their will. And one of their strongest proponents was Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin. And Jimmy was deeply involved in this. He bought Alistair Crowley's former house in Scotland on, of all places, Lake Loch Ness. Go figure. And there's a picture of that particular demon that they channeled, and they wrote out this book of the law. Well, the weird thing is, that is 120 years ago, which is Genesis 6:3. Man's allotted 120 years of life. And they will be celebrating April 8th, 9th, and 10th. So my goal to remind you of is, if they're feasting and they're worshiping their alien creature named AIWASS, we should be fasting. So many other people are coming out and saying, this is probably a good day to fast. I'm going to take off from work and I'll be fasting that day. So it's just interesting that with all of these things going on, that there will be a huge satanic ceremony occurring from the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th, celebrating this particular god and Alistair Crowley, who is generally considered to be the most evil man ever. He even takes out Hitler. More things. Okay, so the devil comet. So basically, this comet, for some reason, hit something, or something occurred to it, and so it developed little horns on its head. So it's Comet Pons 12P and Pons Brooks, and it's starting to get visible now, guys, and I'll show you that in the next slide, but also the cicadas. And so this is once per 221 years, a mating feeding frenzy. They're noisy, they're kind of stinky, they're weird, and they're all popping up. So one more sign, and this is the area that they would pop up during that intersection point in Little Egypt. And it's just, it kind of reminds you of the locusts from the 8th plague in Egypt. It kind of does. So once again, there's the cross. That's Little Egypt, and the cicadas coming in 2024. It's 2 broods. Very interesting. Noisy and strange. Very strange to be popping up during the eclipse. And this is the New Madrid area. This is where the greatest earthquake occurred. The Mississippi literally flowed north rather than south as this earthquake hit in 1811 and 1812. It is the largest earthquake ever in America. And it's interesting that that's where it's crossing, in that general vicinity where the eclipses are crossing. So one more interesting point. The planets are technically going to line up, but according to Ben Davidson, not actually in alignment when you realize how different their orbital distances are. So it's, do you remember Aquarius, Let the Sun Shine In? You guys are too young for that, but I remember it. I was a little kid. And, when the planets align, when the moon is this, it's all, you know what it is. And so it's rather interesting that you will be able to see the eclipse. You'll be able to see 12 Ponds Brooks, 12P, and potentially see the planets align during the same time frame. I mean, guys, it's just bizarre. All of these things are all occurring like this. And keep in mind, go.
I was just going to say the point that Rachel brought out, and I've seen other people that have posted that too. I mean, it's, again, let's go back to Genesis 1. The sun, the moon, the stars, the constellations were put there for signs. Now, I believe this is a sign. I believe that the 2017 eclipse and the blood moons in 14 were signs, but I believe they were warning signs. I believe this is a warning sign. But again, even though our friendly doctorate skeptic on the panel does not want to put too much faith in Yeshua returning after 2 days, I still believe that. I'm at 99.99%. I'm just not going to go to 100% and say, Yeshua will be back by 2034. Bank on it. Take it to, I'm putting my kingdom status. I'm just not going to do that. But that's why I think it's significant, Joel, is because we're about 1,994-ish years since Yeshua returned to his place. And this is not a new doctrine or teaching. It pre-existed Yeshua. The rabbis were teaching it. So anyway, that's why I think it's important. It's the timing, and I Doug probably just think it's coincidence that it's 6 years, 6 months, 6 weeks, and 6 days after the after the 2017.
It is, but it's just cool.
That's just a coincidence.
Hey, you can all tell me that I was, just a stick in the mud. That's fine. When something happens, you can tell me then. I don't know.
Are there any cool questions, Doug?
No, keep going. It's really great.
Okay, all right. Do you mind popping the screen back up? Okay, so the main thing is the moon sets off our tides. So, based on where the moon is in its cycles and things like that. Well, can you imagine if these planets line up, there might be some tidal changes and there could be some earthquakes. I'm not saying that we're going into the 7 years, but it's just interesting to note that the planets might cause some tidal changes, some flooding, some interesting things. Okay, we'll just call it that. Okay, then keep in mind during the time that you're going to be watching this eclipse and all the other things in the sky, you might see a star explode and it will be visible in the night sky. So this is a star, millions of miles away, but for some odd reason, this nova could be visible. And this is from March 16th. It looks like we might see this occur. It's due in the next 4 months, they assume. And we're seeing more of the micronovas. So keep in mind, the micronova would just be dust accumulating on a sun, our sun, any sun, and then an explosion in one little section, okay? Full nova would be the sun exploding. And so this one seems to be a full nova, okay? Continuing on, asteroids fly by all the time. And so I wanted to mention, here's the picture down below the asteroid there in the middle. That's 1833, that's Niagara Falls, and there were tons of asteroids falling, meteorites falling during that time frame. That's what kicked off that odd time when you had technically all three groups there. You had the Millerites, you had the Seventh-day Adventists that became, the Millerites became the SDAs generally, and then you had the Mormons in that same vicinity of upstate New York, and you had the Jehovah's Witnesses. They didn't officially start until 1859, but it just kicked off this eschatological frenzy in upstate New York. So the meteorites tend to do that with people. And then once again, this is 12 pea ponds, and it is then over a lighthouse in Michigan. They kind of had to do a composite photo, but it's really going to be pretty if you can see that during the eclipse. And then we are in the midst of 3 Purim eclipses in a row. Now, it was a slight eclipse in this year, in 2024. It will be a full eclipse next year in 2025, and then 2026. And so it's interesting. Purim is that time frame when the Jews are attacked by Haman and his followers, and they get to fight back. And there's Esther, there's Mordecai, and things like that. And so we hope that this is a sign, if it is, that the Jews will win this war right now, because Iran, which is that Haman area, it's Susa, basically, is making war drums against Israel right now. So it's just interesting to note that we're having 3 eclipses in a row, and this is from Supernatural by Design. I'm blanking on his name, but I like him, but he predicts rapture dates all the time. Okay, then you have to be aware of this too. So Ali Khamenei from Iran was born on an eclipse in 1939. Bibi Netanyahu was born on an eclipse in 1949. And he was born during the time frame of the blood moon eclipses from 49 to 50. It's just, I realize it's a preponderance of interesting information. There's nothing, Doug can't write a PhD thesis on this, but it's interesting, guys. Okay, then now we're getting into CERN. Okay, so this comes from Jim Staley, and I don't know if he found it or he found somebody that found it, but basically, this is so weird, guys. So CERN is located in a city called Saint-Genès-Poli in Switzerland, and it looks like it came from the Latin term APPOLLIACUM, and that's APOLLOA. Yes, that is that God, the Latin God, the Roman God, and you know who he is. And this city was built in about 45 to 55 Common Era, and it looks like it was a gate to the gods. And I'll show you the slide in a little bit. There is a reason to believe that it's a potential gate to the gods. So I'll show you the slide and you'll be amazed. So I want to quote this to you so that you're aware that we're all looking forward to this at some point in time, not exactly with bated breath, but we're looking forward to it. The 5th angel sounded his shofar, and I saw a star that had fallen out of the heaven onto the earth, and he was given the key to the shaft leading down to the abyss. He opened the shaft of the abyss, and there went up smoke from the shaft like the smoke of a huge furnace, and the sun was darkened, and the sky too, by the smoke of the shaft. They had as a king over them the angel of the abyss. In Hebrew, his name is Abaddon. In our language, he is the destroyer, and that is Apollo. Sorry, I'll say the word. So it's just interesting how, there it is in the text, and we'll get to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the next one after this. So CERN, of all times, it's been dormant for a couple of years here, and they're kicking up April 8th, of all times. So why? Why would they? And the main thing is, why during that time frame? Why in this location? Why honoring their God from that particular location? Let's just quote Sergio Bertolucci. Out of this door might come something, or he might send something through it. And there have been some people talking about apparitions there and something weird going on there. And so it's going to restart, and it's going to be colliding at that point in time. And let's get to the next slide so you can see the ring. This is so bizarre. Even Doug will be wondering about this one. So it's a circle. It was first a smaller circle. Now it's going to be a bigger circle. It's set up to honor the god Apollo, okay, in Switzerland. It is set up to be a gate of the god, because that's what the temple was there, and built in like 45 Common Era. And it's a circle where they send the beams around clockwise, then they send them around counterclockwise, and they smash into each other. And I believe they're trying to open up portals. Now, this is where it gets really, really weird because you can't write this stuff. So Obama made a movie called Leave the World Behind. And he made this movie just a few months ago. And this is a screenshot from that movie where you have the two kids in Alistair Crowley's tool shed, which I can't even tell you what goes on or what went on in Alistair Crowley's tool shed, but you can guess with the kids there what happened. So that's Alistair Crowley on the left-hand side saying, obey his thelema, laws, things like that. And on the right-hand side, it's the kid wearing the NASA shirt. And it's been choreographed. So just bizarre, guys. I mean, go figure that they would make this movie from Obama that would highlight CERN and highlight Leave the World Behind. And it's just bizarre. Okay, so once again, it's going to be the first collisions of proton beams are expected on April 8th. Okay, and that's from one of our scientific friends called Nick Hiff. And then on the right-hand side, the accelerator report that they're going to gear up after their yearly break. They call it a maintenance break. And so, yeah, it's kicking off the 2024 particle season. Just bizarre. Why now? Why April 8th? Why? Opening up portals? Maybe. And then this is going back to 2009. When they first opened it up, they sent Tom Hanks over there and other famous actors, and they had Goat Boy, and they had, we'll call him Azazel, and Sex Magic, and other things like that going on. There's ceremonies.
They invited Sean Griffin?
What?
They invited Sean Griffin from Kenan in Context to serve Goat Boy?
No, they had Tom Hanks there and other famous people. I mean,
okay. Well, you said Goat Boy.
Goat Boy. Oh, yeah. That was from Saturday Night Live. That is so funny.
No. Goat Boy is from mine and Doug's little debate conversation we had with Sean. And Sean teaches that Yeshua is the eternal sacrificer of celestial goats. So in the community, we now call him Goat Boy.
Okay. All right. Doug, you're ready to weigh in. Doug, you've let it go so far. Weigh in, Doug.
Keep going.
And this is, I mean, it's all very, very weird stuff that they were doing at CERN. There's no question about that. You know, whether it's a gate to the gods, I don't know. But it is incredibly strange, the symbology that they decided to throw in there for some odd reason, you know. Yeah, so go on. It's really interesting.
It's bizarre. So once again, we have the Azazel, the Baphomet creature. We have that. The horns are always involved, but also CERN's major logo is this goddess, and I'm blanking on her name right now, but basically that'll be the next slide. And so she is the emblem of them, and she's the god of destruction. I'll explain that in the next slide. But that's what CERN looks like next to her. So you can see the type and shadows between the two of them. Once again, you know, the planets are starting to align. And then I mentioned the fifth dimension. When the planets align, it seems to be a time for the pagans to celebrate. So here it is, Shiva, and she is their spokesmodel, you know, and it's just weird, you know. And then the 666 symbol of CERN. If you break those figurines apart, you will see a 666 in there. And so here it is. So Shiva, the great destroyer, destined to annihilate the cosmos at the end of time, then reborn as part of the endless cycle and death and rebirth. I can't write it like that, guys. I mean, that's just bizarre that would be their symbol, that they're trying to remake the cosmos. Very weird. Okay, so and Carl Sagan was involved in this too. All the famous people just love it. Their cosmic dance of the whatever, you know. It's just weird. The cosmic dance of subatomic particles. Okay, and now we get into Tom Horn. And Tom Horn had a dream years ago where God messaged him and said there will be a certain comet coming towards the Earth in 2029, and he called it APOPHIS. Well, that is actually an ancient Egyptian god, APEP. And I don't know, Doug, have you ever studied that at all?
Yeah, actually, this is the very god that the Egyptians suggested was the god that they were fighting when the Israelites were leaving. So they ascribed, that god to actually Jehovah. So it gets a little bit, it gets a little bit contorted when you're trying to understand who's who and who thinks what, So, but they thought this was their enemy god. So,
Oh,
what it's worth, yeah.
okay. So basically, NASA is saying we just want to send up sounding rockets so that we can test out what's going on electrically and other and in the physics world. So they're going to send up these rockets, but why name them APOPHIS? Why? And they're going to send them up on April 8th, 3 times during the day. And so here it is on the right-hand side, these never-ending battles between the god Ra and the indestructible APOPHIS in ancient Egyptian beliefs. So
Well,
this,
and
yeah, yeah.
so if I mean, I don't know if I know you don't want to say the names, but it's hard to talk if everybody's getting
It's
misspelled.
hard. I know.
But I think Ra is certainly the bad guy, and Apophis, I think, because the Egyptians think he's the bad guy, and they actually ascribe him to being a serpent standing on his tail, a fiery red serpent standing on his tail at the Exodus, the parting of the waters, which they have in all of the Egyptian tombs of the pharaohs, which is wild to think about that, right? Then I think that's probably the good guy, right? That's actually Yehovah right there, and
Sure.
Ra is certainly the bad guy. And so what's funny is a lot of the things that you're talking about, I'm actually going to be talking. We've put into Regenesis code, the story Regenesis code, and so we're speculating on some of these things, and it's certainly fun to speculate, and we'll have to wait and see what happens when it all comes down. So this is fascinating.
Okay. Then we continue on. So it's known. So APEP. I'm sorry, I said it. The great serpent, the enemy of the sun god Ra. In ancient Egyptian religion, the sun was Ra's great barge, which sailed through the sky from dawn to dusk and then descended into the underworld. As it sailed through the darkness, it was attacked by APOPHIS, who sought to kill Ra and prevent sunrise. It's just interesting when you compare that with what NASA is sending up to, check out the solar eclipse. It's just, you can't write these scripts this way. Yeah, the second round of these rockets launches are scheduled for the total eclipse of April 8th, and they're sent out of Virginia, which is interesting. They'll be collecting data to answer the following scientific questions. Does the eclipse shadow directly seed discernible irregularities in the mid-latitude ionosphere? Well, and okay, so let's have some fun with this. We know that our magnetosphere is thinning. We know that ozone layer is thinning. Not CERN, but how about NASA and ESA, European Space Agency, have been documenting this for years, and then they stopped documenting it. So we believe that that area that protects us from asteroids, meteorites, and from UV is thinning probably 25% now since 1859 when we had the Carrington event. So it's just interesting to note that your solar storms are going to get worse. And so NASA needs to test that out. And I hope they'll give us a report back on this and say, here's what the ozone layer is like. And the sun causes that layer to thin. So you can't blame that on mankind. So once again, Tom Horn. Interesting story. Nice gentleman. He did a phenomenal job on Petrus Romanus. I've read most of his books, and that one was exceptional. I'm a huge fan of Chris Putnam when he was alive, and I thought they did very great research on that. So anyway, this asteroid is supposed to hit then April 13th of 2029. I don't know. So let's pretend that just by conjecture, we started out sometime late in 2025. That'd be about the midpoint, And I was a huge guy thinking 2017 was going to kick things off. And then 2023, assuming that Yeshua died in 30 Common Era. Well, it looks like I've been wrong every single time. So, this
Or,
is
or,
or
or we're actually in the final 7 years, and the Jesuits did a masterful job of infiltrating the Protestant church, and we all believe that the 70th week is yet future. So a lot of people are looking for a covenant with the many to start this 7-year period. And again, I've said I have not ruled out 2027 until we get past Passover. If we make it past Passover, nothing major happens. I think then we can cross that date. In other words, reverse engineer this as opposed to setting a date and then having to revamp it. But when 2020 happened, I've always thought 2027 was 1 year too early, even with the wiggle room. But again, it could be that you're not wrong, Joel. It could be that you might have an incorrect understanding of Daniel 9:27.
that'll be
I mean,
another
again,
day.
maybe my understanding is saying one of us or both of us has.
We're going to be wiggling a lot. All of us are going to be adjusting eschatology.
And I like to use, because everybody throws out false teacher all the time. You're not being a false teacher tonight just because somebody differs with you. You may be incorrect. You could be wrong. I think it's when it's false is when you know it's false and you're trying to sell books or you're trying to make money and you're not being true to what you actually believe. But I find all this stuff fascinating myself. So I mean, and I just don't think it's coincidence that it's lining up with everything else that's happening and it appears to start to happen. I mean, we've got a powder keg right now in Russia and in Israel and in Iran. I mean, it's a powder keg, and in China. So this is not.
How about the Taiwan earthquake? And China said, we'll send soldiers to Taiwan to help you clean up the mess. We'll send 100,000 soldiers over there to help you out, guys. China, great guys.
Yeah. So, but again, don't just because there was not some peace treaty signed this past fall in 2023. In other words, I haven't crossed off 2028 or 2029 or 2030. But again, and our friend John Howler says this a lot, the logistics of this, it's not going to, I think they're going to have everything in place, because Satan, the beast, they're not omniscient beings. They're not omnipotent. They're going to have to use technology and the system that's being implemented and built right now for him to have that kind of control with technology, to your point about the technocrats. So again, I don't stand. I don't know, guys. It's just don't beat yourself up for being wrong. You could have been right, So we'll just have to wait and see.
Doug? Oh, okay. All right. Tom Horn kind of linked that APOPHIS asteroid with the bitterness, the wormwood from basically it's when they came to the bitter waters of Mara in Exodus, and then also with Revelation, then that would be, why am I blanking? Revelation chapter 8 should be the third trumpet. Okay, so it's rather interesting. I'm not saying that is wormwood, but it's an interesting connection there. But Tom Horn did say he thought that it was wormwood. So that's his opinion. Okay, this is from Mark Biltz again, and he's talking about anti-Semitism, ethnic cleansing, political battles, Iran, God's judgment. And then, guys, on the right-hand side, this is our hurricane outlook for this season. Typically 14 is the average of named storms. We're expecting 23. So hurricanes, then 7 is average, 11 is the forecast. Major hurricanes, instead of 3, it would be 5. That's a lot of growth. And also, once again, Ben Davidson is predicting the first Category 6 hurricane this year. So I can't imagine what that would do to shred things. But if a 6 could occur, it would be horrific. And then in terms of, so this is a list of all of these particular gods. Again, APOPHIS, the snake god that attacks Ra, the sun god. CERN is building on top of Apollo's temple. And then it unveils Shiva, the god of destruction. NASA is, they're constantly telling us Enlil as their prediction modeler, and that's the king of the gods. Zeus, 3-day astrophysical applications. Alistair Crowley's involved in this. This is their big celebration. And then we have our friend Obama's back in the news. And then in America right now, I want to quote from Deuteronomy 28. Foreigners who live in your land will gain more and more power while you gradually lose yours. They will have money to lend you, but you will have none to lend them. In the end, they will be your rulers. Some of that seems to be occurring. Now, I can't say that we are, the people that were told in Deuteronomy 28 that this would occur. I would assume that this would be based on the land, but for some reason, it matches up with us. So, once again, that Aquarius song and the planets are lining up and Obama's back. And we've always had this interesting thing where he's been linked with the God of all things. So my comment to you is observe where Obama is on April 8th. The last time we watched him, he was busy in 2019. And as we mentioned during another meeting a few weeks ago, I mentioned that he was at the seat of Satan, which is Revelation 2:13. He was in Berlin and he was giving a speech and checking out the seat of Satan there on Museum Island. So it's just one more interesting thing. And that is the seat of Satan there in Germany on the lower right-hand side. And that's where it looked like in Asia Minor, in Pergamos. And then on the left-hand side, that's what it looked like in Babylon. So it's just interesting, what's going to happen on April 8th. What I'm telling you, it's going to be religious on their side, on the pagan side, we'll call it, and they'll be feasting. We should be fasting, and the key players, just watch them. Just watch what they're doing if they're worshiping. And I mentioned again, this is from when we met a few weeks ago, that there were these eclipses over ancient Babylon, a couple of eclipses that occurred before the first time Babylon fell. This is not during Nimrod. This is after him. But anyway, amazingly, an ancient cuneiform text says that there was a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse prior to the destruction of the original. This is Hammurabi's Babylon Empire. This is from Blazing Press, but technically Michael found this one, and Michael Snyder. And then here's another one when it fell again, when technically Medo-Persia came in and overwhelmed Babylon without even a fight. There were 2 intersecting solar eclipses over ancient Babylon, 7 years apart, about the time of its fall. So it's just more conjecture, more interesting things, and more, Revelation 2:13, and more of the throne of Satan sitting there in Germany. So really, this is pretty close to the end here. This is about that weird guy, Alistair Crowley, and how he worshiped Satan. And so this is a document from some pagan source, Scarlet Woman Lodge, saying April 10th, 8th through the 10th, 3 days of writing of the book of law, and they will be celebrating. And it's just interesting how it repeats. It doesn't mean that we're going into the Great Tribulation. It just means these are the weirdest signs I've ever seen in my life. And I've been, like even the bridge. So the United States abstains from a vote on Israel. And then the next day, the Francis Scott Key Bridge falls down. And even Haller wondered, what's going on with this? It just seems, there's a guy named Bill Conid that wrote a book, Eye to Eye, great book, detailing how George Bush sided against, this is HW. No, which one was the first one? Yeah, HW is the first Bush. He sided against Israel, and then this Kennebunkport was destroyed by the perfect storm. And then 2005-ish, we have the Katrina that came in, and Bush W sided against Israel in that case and set up Gaza. Boom, Katrina hit. And it was like Katrina was just sitting out there waiting for him to do something stupid. He did the stupid thing. We got hit. So it's conjecture, but this is The Economist saying Israel is alone right now in the world. The United States just came out today. Our UN ambassador, or rather our Secretary of State, said, well, maybe if Israel won't change its mind, we'll change our mind on Israel. So it's conjecture. It's 8 o'clock at night. Doug, what do you think?
Well, I thought it was interesting that J.D. Thomas just did a fact check. He said it was 6 years, 7 months, and 22 days. So
Right.
there you go.
It is.
And that's what I feel like a lot of this stuff is that, because I used to do the very same thing. I did this when I was a pre-tribber. I collected all the facts. Wheat rust was going to overtake the wheat, harvest, and we were going to basically all be starving. And nothing happened. So I mean, I get it. And none of us can know until these dates come and go. Now, could these be harbingers? Maybe. I mean, sure. I'm. Someone said, "Oh, Doug, the eternal skeptic." Well, I guess. Yeah, at this point, I am kind of skeptical on these kinds of things. I mean, Joel, I think your presentation was fantastic. It really, really was interesting. You obviously put a huge amount of work into this, and I mean, wow, there's a lot of amazing stuff.
Did I miss anything?
Well, I mean, I don't know.
Has anybody commented and said, "Oh, Joel, you missed it"?
Well, I don't suppose. I mean, it's interesting. I was just reading on Drudge. I mean, it's right today. It says CIA warns Iran attack within 48 hours.
Yeah.
War cabinet meets, embassies evacuated. I mean, so things are happening, right? I'm not going to deny that. So I'm not so skeptical that I can't just read the news, right? I see that things are happening. The $1 million question is, okay, what does it mean prophetically, right? And that's obviously what we're here to discuss. And I think you've brought forward a lot of very interesting facts that, if there's a correlation between all of these, then, hey, watch out, people. It could be that, maybe we're all seeing things that aren't there, or maybe we're seeing things that are there, and, we'll have to wait and find out. So fantastic.
Scott?
I can't think of anything. I mean, you mentioned the Devil's Comet. You mentioned the planets aligning. You mentioned CERN. I mean, I haven't heard of anything that's actually set to go that day. I mean, I think you mentioned like 7 or 8, 9 different,
Yeah.
There's more. The red heifer class. So this is Adam Eliyahu.
Oh.
He's a friend of mine. The red heifers are ready. So 2 of them qualify. A third one is kind of goldish red, but it's still red. And so he was over there the other day. He looked at the red heifers. They're beautiful critters. They're shipped over from Texas. They were shipped in 2022. And so his most important point in the last few days was, if anyone says it will happen on Passover, they're lying. It can't, because they just found some kid to be the Cohen Gadol, the chief Cohen, and he's not ready to go. And I would argue, so we'll use the Hebrew words here, tamei, tahor. Tahor is ritually pure, tamei is ritually impure. He might be ritually pure. He's never been around corpse contamination. So he's never been in a hospital. He's never been around a dead person. He's never been in a room with a dead person. He's never touched someone that was around a dead person. And we don't exactly understand why God, I think, Doug could answer this the best, that in the end, God has to destroy death and Hades. And so it seems like corpse contamination is part of that process. So he's saying, Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz is saying, we're not ready to go yet. This kid is green, and we don't know his level of Torah. I didn't see a kippah on his head. So, I'm wondering about that, how orthodox he is. Can you imagine? So we have the reading this week of all readings is where Nadab and Abihu go into the tabernacle and they start making a fire of some sort, and it's called strange fire. And they're killed. They die. And according to the rabbis, they're hauled out basically on their garments. They're literally burned to a crisp. So it's just intriguing when you see this occurring, and you see Adam's put out 3-4 videos in the last couple of days here saying, were meeting. We just had a rabbinic meeting. It was all in Hebrew, so no Christians were there. And they're trying to set up guidelines on how they could sacrifice the red heifer on the Mount of Olives. And it has to overlook the Temple Mount. And then what do? I mean, they can't just walk through a graveyard into the Temple Mount area. They're going to have a causeway set up. So there's logistics, people. So nothing's going to happen on Passover. Nothing. There's not going to be a rapture this year. I agree with Scott there. But there are going to be logistics this year.
Well, it is very interesting, that it's happening over America. Is that significant? Is it just because we live here and we think this is important? Or is it because we are still the one sole superpower that, God's trying to tell us something? Very possible. Very possible. Man, fascinating.
When you add in the red heifer, I mean, Christianity is all abuzz. So my comment again is we are not re-crucifying Christ. Okay, so the sacrifices were only for ritual impurity, for unintentional sins. There never was a sacrifice other than Yeshua, his blood, for intentional sins, guys, Avon and Pesha type sins. So we don't quite understand this. And to be honest with you, the rabbis don't understand clean, unclean that well either. They would argue, well, I just do more mitzvahs and their mitzvot, and then everything's clean, Well, they don't quite get it either. It's been 2,000 years and they've lost a lot of information related to this. In fact, if they want to bury somebody today, they go talk to Christians and say, how did you bury Jesus? Oh, that's how we'll bury. Yeah, literally, when they go to the Chevra at a Jewish synagogue, has to research based on Christian tradition with Yeshua to figure out how to bury a Jew today.
Interesting. Okay. That's pretty crazy. Wow. Well, I think there's a lot of amazing things that are happening. You did a fantastic job of bringing those all out. The rituals that happen at CERN just make no sense whatsoever, and that they have Shiva right there. They got a destruction. You worked so hard to not say it, and then I said
I tried hard.
But but yeah, when you start looking at all these different gods, they all come down to the same basic gods, which I detail in Corrupting the Image Volume 2 extensively. I think they all lead back to Satan ultimately, in one form or another. Though, he certainly could have obviously minions doing part of the work, but I think, he likes to take credit for it. And so when you start looking at these gods of death throughout the world, I think they're all basically the same dude, which is Satan. And it is pretty crazy. And there does seem to be a resurgence and a return of the ancient gods. Yep. Christianity is becoming less and less popular. I was just reading an article about this, and they're talking about, hey, in fact, even oh my gosh, the atheist skeptic Dawkins was basically, noting that, well, maybe Christianity wasn't so bad insofar as it was giving some decent, things for living, because what's coming in and it's void is Islam, which is very hardcore in many areas. There's not a lot of freedom in Islam, generally speaking, not like there has been in Christianity. So the atheists have had a field day, throwing stones at Christianity, and sadly they have been somewhat successful. And Christianity is dropping in many countries, especially in the UK, in Scotland. Their churches are just essentially empty at this point, and so when you put this all together, this leaves a void, right? It's not that everyone just becomes a really nice atheist and we're all going to think logically. It doesn't work that way. There's a void of something, and I think it is a return to the old gods, and that's what I'm predicting in Corrupting Image Volume 3, in Regenesis Code, where I think that the old gods are going to be repackaged as aliens. They're going to come to save the day. And so a lot of the things you're talking about here, I mean, these really could be setting the stage for future events. Again, whether it happens this year, is anybody's guess, but that these are all things that are being factored in is truly astounding. and you know, we're wise to keep our eyes open. So, you know, thanks for bringing all that, Joel.
It seems like they're pushing the envelope just a little bit more every day, you know, with naming the gods and associating them with whatever activities. And so it seems like whatever you've been researching for the last 15 years will be really, really important as we go forward,
Yeah.
because these we would believe that these gods seem to have some kind of power and will
Mm.
do certain activities. So it's probably
Mhm.
good to learn what they did in Babylon and Egypt and other places to figure out what's going to be coming next.
Yeah. Well, you know, so let's think about this for a second. So Jesus, he takes his disciples to Caesarea Philippi, right? You got to think about it. Why would a good Jewish rabbi take his pious disciples to Caesarea Philippi, right? I mean, this is kind of Las Vegas of the ancient world. What stays in Caesarea Philippi, you know, what happens there stays there, right? That's the basic idea. So he goes specifically to a pagan site. I mean, this place is so pagan. It's not even funny. It had been pagan for hundreds of years, potentially thousands of years, depending how you look at it. But it was very pagan in the time of the Greeks. They thought that, you know, Bacchus was there, the god of wine. They thought that, you know, the satyr god was there as well. And so there was a well that was coming up, you know, the spring, and so water was always flowing out of it. But they tried to put some, you know, rocks down there with some tied to some ropes to see how deep this thing was, and they could never find the bottom. And so they started calling it the gates of Hades. But it was also thought that, you know, this was very much a cultic place. They had, you know, they had Zeus and Aphrodite in the Greek terms, right? But these are the same gods that had been there all the time. Now, towering above this thing was Mount Hermon, right? This is where the gods came down, right? And there were, you know, according to the Book of Enoch, there were 200 that came down, and they made some oath. Now, I'll tell you what's so amazing is when I was writing Cryptic Image Volume 2, I got interested in this supposed quote that, you know, or this this stele that had been found, and it said, according to the great and holy God, those taking an oath proceed from here. And I'm like, that doesn't make much sense. Why would they take an oath if they're going to go against what God said to do? Why would they take an oath in his name? It just didn't make any sense to me. So I was like, I want to see the actual stele. So I looked it up in the British Museum, and I'm looking at this thing, right? I actually find it the original stele, just the stone. I'm looking at the Greek, and I'm like, it doesn't say holy. You know, it's not the word hagios. It's the word batios, right? And I'm like, what in the world is batios, right? I'm like pulling my hair out and trying to figure this thing out. It doesn't make any sense. What in the world is batios? There is no Greek word batios. It does not exist. Now, I had been doing some research at the time on, well, I'm just going to say it, Enlil. Sorry, but
I tried hard.
I know you did. You worked so hard. And I just threw it off. All right. But I was doing well. I talked about him already. So I was doing all this research on Enlil. His secret name, when you start looking at the cuneiform. So this will be his symbol. Okay, his logogram. It comes out bad, okay, or BAD, right? Bad, all right. Which is I've always wondered, like, is the English word related to that? I don't know. Okay, maybe. But anyway, this word bad could also be bat. All right, so B and D and T are, you know, basically the same thing. They're dental letters, right? So anyway, so I was like, I wonder, could it be that you have this name Bad, which means death? Right there he is, the god of death, right? Death and enmity. Yeah. It's right there, and there. So I'm kind of thinking about this. Anyway, long story short, I found out that this was a hybridized name between the ancient Sumerian and the Greek. It was amazing. I happened to be the first guy that found this, which was kind of fun. But there it is. The god of death was the one who authorized those 200 angels to go out and, you know, do their naughty things back in the days of Noah, right? And it's the god of death. We keep finding the god of death. I think it's the god of death who is going to open up the gates of Hades. I differ from Tom Horn. He thinks it's an actual comet. I don't think that. I don't think that the comet is going to be the issue. I think the star that falls from the heaven is actually Satan, and I think he will fall at the time of when he and his angels are fighting against Michael and his angels. And then guess what? He has the key to the abyss, and he opens it up somehow. Right now, we don't know how he gets the key. Somehow he just acquires it, and of course, we don't know exactly what the
Is
gates
CERN
of-
trying to open that?
Well, you know,
they've got a circle.
Yeah,
A
no,
gate?
I'm with you. Again, in Regenesis code, I talk about this, right? I actually have a scientist.
Okay.
You know, I have a scientist who is working at CERN,
Yeah.
and you know, he's doing some experimentation, trying to open up some stuff, and he does, right? You know, so
Yeah.
I'm tracking with you, right? I'm just,
Right. Yeah.
you know, it's
Did you know that it was
whether
a
we can prove
circle?
things.
That
Oh,
CERN?
yeah,
I
oh yeah,
did
of course
not
it's a
know
circle.
that.
No, I
I
mean,
thought it was a
yeah.
line.
Oh no! It has to be a circle because they have to go this particle accelerator. It has
Right.
to go around, you know, really fast a whole bunch of times until they can accelerate it close to the speed of light, and then they, you know, smash
Oh,
it
it's
together.
going to be 7 miles under the speed of light. Think about that.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. You know, that really is impressive. And you know, I think on the one hand, they're just trying to do science. You know, but could there be some nefarious agenda deep down? Yeah, I think there very well could be. You know, and again, I think all good science can be used for evil, right? So that's where I would take it. I really don't like to throw researchers and scientists under the bus because they're all, you know, devilish, trying to open up
Dr.
I
Evil.
I just don't think so. Yeah. I think that most of them have very good intentions and they're really trying to make the world a better place. But,
Okay.
you know, one guy can come along and he can turn all of that good stuff into bad stuff. And you know, but again, why do they have Shiva outside their door? Like, you guys, like, this is just strange. Like, you know, the optics here are not very good for what you're trying to do. So, you know, it's just crazy. And, you know, when you think about these old gods, it was at Babel, right? This is where the gate of the gods got started. And, you know, our God seems to be pretty ticked off still at Babel, because even in the book of Revelation, he's talking about Babel. Now, in the days of John, Babel as any kind of a important city did not really exist. I mean, it was there and people were still living there, but, you know, it was not the center of the world by any stretch of the imagination. So God still has this vendetta. You see it throughout Scripture. He's got this vendetta against Babel, because that is where all these, you know, multiform gods came into being, essentially. And that's where they really began to divert man's attention from the one true God to all these
Was Babel a gate of the gods?
I think so. Yeah, I definitely argue that in Corrupting Image Volume 2 that that it was a gate of the gods. And I think, you know, again, I don't know exactly how, but I you know, I speculate a little bit in my book that you know, they were trying to create a wormhole, right? And so that's what I think they were trying to do. They could use, you know, and now they're discovering that wormholes and quantum entanglement are maybe actually the same thing, right? It's kind of strange. You're like, oh my goodness. You know, in fact, it's called D-Link computers. So quantum computers. So they're trying to use quantum computers, right? And they're talking about how they're going to open up some kind of a portal and they're going to reach into this other dimension and pull out from there these other resources from this other world.
Well, you saw the quote that I gave you where he said maybe something will come in or maybe something will go out from this. Yeah.
I mean, again, we write about this, Mornay and I, and he's my co-author of Regenesis Code. We talk about this extensively, you know, that this is kind of the stuff that's happening. So, you know, I'm with you, you know, it's just,
this is what you research.
Well,
yeah, exactly.
On this issue, I don't. If CERN is involved in this ripping the veil, in other words, Yah can allow the principalities, the powers of darkness to manipulate, to influence scientists, to influence leaders, et cetera, et cetera. I think if it ever does happen where they open up this portal, this gateway, the heavens, into this other dimension, I believe it's going to happen in the fall. Or, you know, as far
why
as
the fall?
No, I'm sorry. I think it's going to start off in the spring. So in other words, I do believe everything winds up in the fall, and we've got those 42 months, those 1,260 days, the 1,290 days from Daniel, and you just you just look at your biblical calendar. I don't like to call it the Jewish calendar, but if you look at your biblical calendar, if it kicks off in the spring, 3.5 years later is Yom Teruah, Feast of Tabernacles, and Feast of Trumpets. So I don't think we're going to see anything this year that could even possibly qualify as the abomination of desolation. I know some people are saying that the red heifer could be the abomination of desolation. And again, I can make an argument for it, because it says, all it says is when you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy topos place. Doesn't say altar, doesn't say temple, doesn't say anything. It just says a holy location. I personally believe the Mount of Olives is a holy location. I just don't think it's going to qualify as the abomination of desolation. And if they do the red heifer, and some people are probably going to be out there in prophecy world saying that's what it is and start the countdown, get ready for 2027. I don't think, if we're still buying and selling, we're not in the final 42 months, or at least there's a rollout plan. In other words, there's an announcement. They've gone to central digital currency. They give you a 1-year grace period or something, maybe while they're getting this international monetary system, beast system under control. I think they'll have it ready in place right away when it's time to go. And I believe that's all kicks off in the spring, that we'll see an abomination of desolation. Things will start to get supernatural, biblical up in here or down in here, because that portal has been opened. Satan and his minions are kicked out of heaven. They're running around the atmosphere of the earth, or the earth, for this final 3.5 years. And it's going to get, like Doug says, you've got two options. You're either going to believe in God, the God of the Bible, or a God, or you're going to believe in aliens. You're not going to be able to sit here with your rational human mind and go, this is just normal stuff. This is just... So they've got the evolutionary theory. These are more highly evolved species that they created us and they're our gods. Or you've got the truth, which is the biblical account.
Yeah,
I do think that's the only two explanations when this stuff starts happening.
I agree.
Yeah,
you're going to be forced into either camp.
Yeah, and it's going to seem so natural. People look for natural explanations, Occam's razor, and all that stuff, right? They just want okay, what makes the most sense, right? And if you have otherworldly beings that are showing up, right, and then it turns out these otherworldly beings have been around for a long time. We just have called them different things. You think about it. The leader of the Galactic Federation, the people that are, channeling these different spirits and whatnot. His name is Ashtar, right? And you're like, Ashtar, like seriously,
like
that's
Astarte?
Yeah, exactly. So Ashtar is the leader of the Galactic Federation.
Greek. Yeah.
Right. And so this is people that claim to be speaking with aliens. It just so happens that the name of the aliens is exactly the same as the ancient gods. Right?
And you saw that little green man on the screen, that Crowley was talking to, he looks like a little green man,
No, he really does. He really does. Right. So again, there's a lot of weird stuff out there we can't quite make sense of, but you start putting enough of the pieces together, you're like, okay. Again, I'm a little skeptical on dates especially. But again, that we are marching toward the end. Oh, I totally believe that. I totally believe that. And I think there's a lot of weird stuff that's going on. What exactly Crowley did, I don't know, but he claims to have opened some portal, him and Parsons, that they opened up the portal and they invoked Babylon. I don't know.
Parsons, JPL
and of
Labs.
course, yeah. So Babylon obviously is, what is Babylon, right? Who was the leader of Babylon? Who started Babylon? It was Nimrod. Okay. And Nimrod in the ancient world was known as Ninurta. He was the son of Enlil. And when you understand that Enlil is Satan, Ninurta is Nimrod. He's the rebel. And he established Babel, the gate of the gods. This was the pleasure palace of the gods. It was the connection point between heaven and earth. So they weren't like trying to build a tall building so they could touch the dome over the supposed flat earth. They were trying to create some kind of a dimensional doorway so that they could get to the other side or let the gods come into this side. And it's interesting that Jacob has a dream where he sees a ladder between heaven and earth. And then Jesus tells us that it was the Son of Man. Jesus is the ladder, right? And so Enlil, Satan, claimed to be the connection point between heaven and earth. And Jesus says, no. I'm the connecting point between heaven and earth, right? So we got this massive battle going on between these two, obviously, very powerful. Jesus, of course, all powerful beings, but Satan has some authority, and that's how he can operate in this world. And so this is what happens between these two. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's clearly some spiritual stuff. I do think that God is going to fully allow Satan, however it may be, but to open up the portal. I think that there may be some magic involved with the science, with the technology, and that probably what you showed there at CERN with all that really weird stuff. I mean, that's just straight up occultic, demonic, and that's where I think, you start casting spells and whatnot that somehow is going to aid in the opening of this door. So yeah, some people are doing real science and they're, just crunching numbers and they're trying to make sense of stuff. But there's another side that is actually, working on this other part of the equation, as it were, which is a spiritual equation. And I think that they're trying to find keys. When you think about the key to the abyss,
there you go. Yeah.
What is a key? I mean, is he going to come with some big metal key and he's like, okay, open this thing up? I don't think so. Don't we all use virtual keys every single day when, we put our thumb on our computer and it opens up, right? Or we put in our password.
When we buy Bitcoin, we need our keys.
It's a key. A key is simply some kind of a password that it locks something. And it doesn't have to be a physical door. It can be very much a spiritual door, right? And so if you kind of need a whole mechanism to make it happen, right? What's involved with opening a door? Well, there's a lock, right? So there's something on the door. Then if you bring something external to that, and what is on that key? Well, there's a code on a physical metal key. There's a code on that physical metal key. We've just simply taken away the metal and we're left with the code. And so this is where I think, you could use the science to help engineer the lock, to help build the key. But what is the code? Who's got the code? And that's where I think they're going to turn to the occult to say, okay, give us the secret password so that we can open this thing up. And I suspect, again, this is what I talk about in Regenesis code. We have a character who is sort of the embodiment of the woman that rides the beast. And, and so she's the one who has all this secret ancient knowledge, this occult knowledge, to give these secret passwords, as it were, to open up the various portals. So again, I'm with you. It's just, we'll see. I don't think it's this year, but it's coming. So
they're not doing it until Yah says it's time, and that'll be. I believe that'll be 3.5 years prior to the end of this age and his return. And if he allows them to use their science and experiments or whatever to open this up, that's just how he does it.
Sure.
I mean, it's just how he chooses to. Yeah. He chooses to let them figure it out, and that's just part of his plan. He's playing 11th dimensional chess, and they're just playing checkers.
Yeah, and what I think an important point to understand is that what we have in the Book of Revelation are the bullet points. Okay, if you've ever done a presentation, you have a bullet point. Usually, there's like a ream of data behind that bullet point, right? But if it's all been summarized in that one point, and that's essentially what the Book of Revelation is doing, is it's telling us these are the highlights, right? These are the things that happen. He had the key to the abyss. Wow. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there. How in the world, could this happen? Well, the Bible doesn't tell us how it's going to happen, simply that it does happen. Right. And so then, this is what kind of freed me when I started writing a fictional book about the end times. I was like, oh my goodness, I really have to think now. It's not just that it happens, but how could it happen? Because I'm trying to put it on the screen or put it in a book, and I'm trying to, kind of envision, right? And so, I go looking for like, okay, what could be a particular mechanism? So I'm kind of stuck somewhere between CERN and quantum computers, and it could be a fusion of the two, or something, I don't know, that they somehow come up with a way to smash particles together and say secret words, and bada boom, there it goes. There's some kind of a little door opening. We're seeing this in the movies too, right? I mean,
Right.
with Doctor Strange and the sling ring, right? And then they can just open up a door to a different dimension, right? I think that's essentially what we're talking about, is that there's going to be a door opened to another dimension. It won't quite be like Doctor Strange, but that will allow things that are on the other side to come to this side. Now, I was going to say, I kind of got a little bit sidetracked, but when Jesus went up on top of Mount Hermon, right, I think that he was putting Satan on notice that, hey, this is now my mountain. You guys claimed it way back when, and Mount Hermon had been known as the mountain of the oath almost since time began, right? As far back as records go, that's what it was called. And Jesus was reclaiming it per Psalm 68. And so what I think when he said that the gates of Hades will not prevail, see, the first century Jewish apocalyptists, they believed that at any moment, the gates of Hades were going to just fling wide open, and that the hordes of Hades, the hordes of hell, were going to just come rushing out of this place with shooting their arrows, right? And so that's what they were imagining. And frankly, I think that was the plan. I think that's what Satan had in mind. And Jesus came along and he said, that's not going to happen. Not on my watch, not today, right? What Satan has planned to do is not going to happen right now. And so it's been delayed. At this point, some 2,000 years it's been delayed. We'll have to wait and see exactly how long it takes, right? But, I think that was Satan's big plan, was to basically get out of jail and, get his buddies out of jail, as it were, and to reclaim the earth. I think that's what he was trying to do. So there's all these little clues that are in Scripture when you start digging deeper, right? I mean, you start looking, where is this place? Mount Hermon. It's in the land of Bashan, right? Bashan is the ancient god Bashmu in the Akkadian. It's just another name for Enlil, for Satan. I mean, it's all in there, right? It's crazy. And you start looking at the great red dragon. That's a symbol for Enlil. Also, Nimrod, the woman that rides the beast. I mean, that is Ishtar. She actually rode the Anzu bird, which was Enlil. And, who's controlling who? Well, I think it's the one down below, the one that she's riding, actually holds the control.
So
and
are we going to watch God battle with these small g gods in the end times? Is it going to be a physical, spiritual? Will we see this occur in our lifetimes?
Well, I don't know if we'll see it in our lifetimes. I mean, who knows that? But I think when it all does finally come down, it says that Satan and his angels are cast out of heaven, right? So I think they exist behind the veil, and they will no longer have that sort of immunity or anonymity to hide behind the veil. They're going to be forced into this dimension. And I think by opening the abyss, they will, I think that happens at the same time. The opening of the abyss, the Satan getting kicked out of heaven, the star falling from heaven to earth, right? Now, again, in the book of Revelation, it's all mishmashed in its order. And that's where we get kind of confused. But just don't look at it. It doesn't happen chronologically. It's happening thematically. And again, that liberated me to understand that it's a thematic arrangement versus a chronological arrangement. And then it works perfectly fine. And so it's just amazing how all these things come together. And so whenever the abyss opens is when Satan gets kicked out of heaven. And of course, I think this happens just moments after, or maybe, hours or days after the beast kills the two witnesses. So one could hasten the other, maybe, a little bit here, a little bit there, but they're all happening basically, in the same couple of days span. And and then it's going to get crazy ugly.
And I will say this, obviously I differ with Doug on this, but it would be nice if two witnesses came on the scene with these supernatural powers before all this.
Oh, exactly.
I mean, again, and I just believe that they/we are testifying in the final 3.5 years opposing the beast. Again, he's going to have authority over the saints, but I think there's going to be supernatural protection for many. So I think it's going to be a biblical, supernatural, spiritual battle on the earth. We're not gonna. You're not gonna be able to win by prepping or stocking up. Once it gets to that level, unless you're just off grid, Bear Grylls survivor, and you can just survive in the woods. I'm not talking like at a homestead. You're going to have to be mobile because with the technology now, there's nobody that's really truly off grid. If you think about it, I mean, they can find you with a satellite.
Oh yeah. Did you watch the Israelis bomb out a couple of terrorists today? I mean, those guys were just walking along a road. The Israelis spot them, and boom, they were dead. I mean, it was just like 3 guys gone, vaporized.
Well, I mean, same thing. And then if the beast system, when it's up and running and everything, if they want to, they don't even have to send in soldiers. They can just, send a missile, take out your house and your homestead. So again, I think there's the only way we're going to survive is supernatural protection.
Right. Exactly. That's what people should be listening to right now. Supernatural protection. Get right with God. Get right with God.
Yeah.
And all this is weird. I mean, maybe it's the algorithms putting in the Eclipse and CERN, but all of a sudden, we between the our 3 channels, we got 737 people watching, and I don't think we've ever had more than 200. So I think if we talk about the weird and the spooky stuff, it obviously gets more viewers. People are interested in this, and Doug, the eternal skeptic, I do appreciate the fact that you like to tap the brakes. No, and again, because you've got a lot of prophecy people. They just do things for shock value and everything. I mean, if we had been friends and been talking in 2017, or 2017 or 2012, I can promise you I would have been chirping and parroting the same thing. We're not even close to 2030 as yet. That's the reason I think this is significant. It's not just because of the eclipse. It's not just because where we're getting at with AI right now. It's just not the central digital currency. It's the Israeli situation. It's the Russian, NATO, American situation. It's China, Taiwan. It's all these, it's the blatant paganism in the American Western media right now, where it's the gods are just on full display, and you've got to do this not to see the evil. You got to be in denial.
And I mean, let's just take a really hot topic, which is transgender and homosexuality and all this stuff. It was Ishtar Ishtar was the goddess in the ancient world. She had these supposed mythical powers that she could change a man into a woman and a woman into a man. I mean, that's transgender right there. Okay. Now, whether or not she could do that, I don't know, but that's what the myth held. And that she had this retinue of transvestites and homosexuals all around her. There's all kinds of ancient literature that was written about this and just praising this, so it's pretty wild stuff that's happening. I mean, we've got to see that, okay, this is just a recycle, right? This is not new. We're just coming back to where we were before. And what's so amazing about Babel is that God himself stepped in. There's only a few times in human history where God himself stepped in. All right. And, certainly at the flood, then you have the Tower of Babel, and then, Jesus, right? Well, I guess you could argue, that, at the, in Egypt, right? God himself.
Oh, so he stepped in there. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm just kind of thinking of the major highlights, but Jesus coming is God himself stepping in. We think, oh, he came to die for my sins. And yeah, he did. But there was this huge battle. I mean, I thought about this when I was going through the book of Mark. I mean, I'm like, guys, this thing is epic. Do you realize how much, butt kicking Jesus is doing here? I mean, he goes right to the epicenter of the spiritual, the spiritual world, which was in Bashan. Bashan is in the Galilee, right? The land of the way of the Gentiles. Why was it called that? Because this was the land of the nations since a long time ago. And I think there was so much demonic activity, which you didn't really have nearly as much in Jerusalem. But right there you had it because Satan's seat was right there. It was Mount Hermon in Bashan, which is the Bashmu. There is a geoglyph of a huge Bashmu, a huge serpent. It's called the Serpent Mound. It's just maybe half a mile from the Gilgal Rephaim. You know, I mean, it's just crazy stuff, right? And it's just down the hill from Mount Hermon, right? So, yeah, like it was right there, you know. And so then Jesus going across the Sea of Galilee, um, you know, there to the other side, and he's encountered with this incredible storm. And then he rebukes the wind, right? I think it was Satan that was actually causing that wind to get all crazy. We know he could do it in the book of Job, right? He, you know, brought this great wind and it brought down the Job's kids' houses and killed them all. And he brought fire from heaven and all this stuff, right? And so Jesus was going over to Gadara, which means fortress. And who did he meet there? Legion, right?
Yeah.
So I think they were like, "Oh no, Jesus is coming. We need to keep him out of here. Let's drown it. Let's drown him. Let's sink the boat." He's like, "No, I'm coming." Right? And he gets over there, and these legions, you know, this legion is like, "Please don't hurt us," right? You know, they're like, "Oh my gosh," you know, like oh my God, like literally, right? Like here is God, and we're in trouble because you know he's coming.
Don't torture us before our time.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
So again, this was God intervening because I think Satan was up to no good, and he's like, no, not going to happen. The gates of Hades, not going to happen. Not on my watch.
They know judgment's coming, but this was not a clickbait title that Kenny D posted. There are no demons going to materialize. Stop trying to scare people. I don't know who said anybody on this panel that said maybe people hear what they want to hear, that we're thinking demons are going to fly out on April the 8th at CERN. But at some point, let me finish. At some point in time, unless you don't believe the Bible and Revelation, there are going to be some creatures released from the abyss. Period. End of discussion. Nobody is saying that's happening on April the 8th or anything. I personally believe that this is a sign for all the reasons I've stated in the past shows, just because of where we are in the timing and nothing I'm seeing come about politically, socially, technologically, economically, spiritually, the transgender stuff. In 2008, Obama opposed gay marriage before he was president, when he ran for president. So go back to 2008, and here we are just a short 14 years later, and we're considered bigots if we don't want our 7-year-old children or grandchildren to be indoctrinated into thinking that they're a little girl if they're a boy. And that's where we are right now as a society. And so for all those reasons, that's why I think this is important, not for clickbait at all. I mean, I think Joel's our new co-host, but Doug and I we don't try to do the clickbait stuff and make crazy predictions. I mean, I haven't even predicted Yeshua's returning by 2034-ish. I just think he is. You know, I believe he is. In 2034, if we're still all sitting around talking on this panel, we'll be a little bit older and grayer and less hair, and I would have been wrong. And that's okay.
And that's when I can say, "See, Scott, I told you."
Yeah, you could. And all my college friends are going to have a blast. I mean, they're going to like, you. Because, I mean, this is something I've been talking about, you know, since I was a kid, since I was a teenager, since I was in college. So that's why I'm paying special attention to this Passover season, this eclipse, this biblical New Year. That's why I'm watching, and I don't know what's going to happen. Something's going to go down. I don't know what.
That's right.
I think it's his. I'm not saying "Thus saith the Lord." I haven't had a dream or a vision. Just believe it.
So let's end it with this, because we are definitely way over time. You know, April 8th is coming. It might just come and go. You know, my hunch is it's going to be a nothing burger. But hey, if it turns out to be a very much something burger, then hey, at least we had some forewarning. That's awesome. You know, on the other hand, I do think that, you know, it may not be anything immediate, but it might be something that happens eventually, right? So, you know, the solution though is, you know, we don't need to go find all the demons under every rock. We're never going to accomplish anything. We don't need to figure out who's behind every conspiracy out there. That the answer to darkness is simple: turn on the light. All right, that's the answer. Turn on the light. You know, and we as believers are to be the light. So we should not be scared. We should not be fearful. We shouldn't be telling people, "Oh my gosh, this was it." You know, like, man, just tell people about God's kingdom. Tell them about how good He is and how much He loves us. That is the antidote, right? So again, weird things are happening. We get that. It's exciting. It's interesting. But the solution is to turn on the light. And you are called to be the light on a hill, to be the salt of the earth. All of us are called to do that. If you're not a believer, hey, this is the time to put your trust in the Lord, right? Ask him just to say, you know what, Lord, I blew it. I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? And he's like, yep. And be part of the kingdom, because God has called us to go and spread the good news of his kingdom. And so that's what we're trying to do here. So we're glad that everybody
Amen.
joined us. Yeah, we're glad everyone joined us. Again, if you want to become a producer, go to patreon.com/Doug Hamp. I would encourage you guys to go get Corrupting the Image 1, 2, and 3, not just because I wrote them, but I think they're very pertinent to what we're talking about. And if you want a story, go get Regenesis Code. I put all that research into a book, and the goal is to get this made into like a Netflix series. You know, I really think we can reach hundreds of millions of people with a biblical worldview about the end times. It's not cheesy. It doesn't have Christian cheese in it, but you know, it's good entertainment, and it's theologically deep. All right. So, you know, pray about that if you would. I'd really appreciate that, because it's been a lot of work, a lot of years trying to get this thing off the ground. So, yeah, with that, we will say good night. So everyone take care. We'll see you.